Right, so in the last few days, we have had some massive news in the world of boxing, and that is that two pound-for-pounders will be squaring off this year when Terence "Bud" Crawford takes the leap of faith and the jump in weight to take on the man that has, for the best part of the last decade or so, been the face of boxing in Saul Canelo Alvarez. Now, the news was broke by the Ring magazine itself, and the Ring magazine is obviously now owned by Turki Al-Sheikh. The shows will be separate to Riyadh season, but it is all kind of tied in, and I think that the fact that Saul Canelo Alvarez and Turki Al-Sheikh have now met each other, they've now seen eye to eye and got over some of the difficulties that started off during the relationship between the two, we can very much take this news at face value. But when the news broke of the September date for this fight, I think most boxing fans were wondering, why are we waiting so long for this fight to actually happen? Canelo Alvarez will have been out the ring for a year or so by the time this fight rolls round, and for Terence Crawford, he will have been out the ring for even longer. So surely both men will want a warm-up fight in the meantime. I think that most of us saw Crawford struggle at times when he moved up in weight to take on Madrimov, and despite some saying that this could point to Crawford having no chance against Canelo, I'd completely go against that. Crawford did not dazzle against Madrimov, but he won the fight in my opinion, and he won the fight fairly against a world-level opponent. However, you could imagine that Crawford would want to dip his toes in again, to be able to acclimatise a little bit more again to fighting bigger men, someone with a similar frame, a similar reach, size, and maybe even a similar style to Canelo Alvarez. And therefore you would imagine that maybe Canelo would want to do the same, because let's be honest, there's fuck all similarities between Berlanga and Terence Crawford. And I don't know about you guys, but for me, there is only one man in world boxing who is able to really replicate the skill set of Terence Crawford. Some might even argue do it better than Terence Crawford, and that man is obviously the rising and fearsome contender, Jake Paul. Oh, the world's gone fucking mad, isn't it? Right, I'm obviously joking. Jake Paul could not lace Canelo or Terence Crawford's jockstrap, but I'm not joking about this fight being lined up for Cinco de Mayo weekend in May. Just trust me on this one. Whether or not this fight comes to fruition, those who know, and talks of this fight have been happening since literally days after Jake Paul's fight against Iron Mike Tyson. And as for Canelo, it's the perfect cash grab, really, isn't it? I mean, we're yet to find out the specifics of this spectacle, if it does happen, but from what I feel about Canelo, I really don't think that he's going to bow down to the rules that Jake Paul might want in place, and therefore I do not believe that you will see Canelo Alvarez fight in 16 or 14 ounce gloves. I do not believe that you will see Canelo Alvarez agree to fight 2-minute rounds. And no, for all of you suggesting the same thing that you suggest before and after every single Jake Paul fight, I do not believe that this fight will be rigged. Canelo may already feel like taking this fight is selling out to an extent, and therefore he will definitely not be participating in this fight if there's a secret hidden rule set in place. And just for the record, I don't believe that there ever is one of those in Jake Paul's fights. But people, before we get into all that, welcome back to the Joey Knight Boxing channel. Please do me a massive favour, subscribe to the channel if you are not already. Around 80% of you guys that watch my videos are not subscribed to the channel, so please, if you want to see more of this sort of content, I need you to subscribe, because that is what allows me to keep banging out these sort of videos. Let's get back into it. Now, here's what you need to remember, right? After that Mike Tyson fight, not only did boxing fans feel angry at Jake Paul, the boxing community and boxers in general felt very, very aggrieved at the situation that had gone down with Jake Paul kind of in a roundabout way, forcing Mike Tyson out of retirement. I know he did it off his own accord, but when you offer a man that sort of money, it's very, very hard for him to turn it down. And that's why you saw in the aftermath the likes of Artur Beterbiev and Daniel Dubois call out Jake Paul. And as for Jake Paul, that would have been exactly what he wanted. He would have not wanted to entertain fights with either of those guys, but the publicity, the headlines, the clicks, the promotion that those sort of stories generate are perfect for the likes of a Jake Paul, and they're perfect for actually helping build up his stardom and therefore funnel into him making more money in his next fight. But all of that being said, why on earth is former YouTuber, now professional boxer, Jake Paul, who, if I had to rate at any sort of level, I'd probably argue isn't good enough to win maybe an area level title in the professional ranks, willing to take on Saul Canelo Alvarez? Well, let's start off by looking at the plus side, and obviously the first thing that comes to mind is a fuck load of cash, but also he does have attributes over Canelo, doesn't he? He's around 6 inches taller, he's got around a 6-inch reach advantage, and most recently he's been weighing in around 35 pounds heavier than Canelo Alvarez has been weighing in for his fights. If you include the Mike Tyson fight, then more like 55 pounds heavier. But let's just cut to the chase here. All of this means nothing, because let me just quickly run you through the levels in boxing. And obviously, being from the UK myself, I'm going to do this in a British perspective. So I don't believe that Jake Paul is good enough to win an area title as a professional at this moment in time right now. Who knows what the future may hold. But in terms of the levels that you have, right, you've got area titles. Then you may progress on to an English title. Then you may progress on to a British title. Then a European title. Then a world title. Then once you get to that world title, you then have the options to unify world titles, picking up multiple belts across multiple weight divisions, either maybe becoming undisputed in those weight divisions. And that is exactly what Saul Canelo Alvarez has done. And unlike former Jake Paul opponents who did it maybe years or decades ago, that is exactly what Saul Canelo Alvarez is doing at this moment in time right now. So here's the cold hard truth for you guys that don't understand this, and 99% of you lot do understand this, by the way, but this is as big a mismatch as mismatches could get. Saul Canelo Alvarez ends this fight whenever and however he wants to. Now, Canelo may well take pity on Jake Paul, or he might just want to give the fans a bit more of a spectacle, a bit more bang for their buck, and a little bit more to see in the ring, and therefore he might want to go a few rounds and carry Jake Paul a little bit, and he might come out and showcase some of that elite head movement that we've seen from him in the past, the elusiveness, the defensive ability. But sooner rather than later, Canelo Alvarez will crack Jake Paul with something, and that punch will be something unlike anything that Jake Paul has ever experienced in his career so far. Timing, accuracy, speed, and technique creates power, and therefore, despite the fact that Jake Paul has taken flush right hands off the likes of Tommy Fury, for example, they're just not comparable to the punches that he will take off Saul Canelo Alvarez and the versatility of those shots that he will take from Canelo. I think that Jake Paul might show some bravery in there and come out and try and enforce his size a little bit upon Canelo, try and back Canelo up, try and take the center of the ring or something like that. And if, for example, what I suggested does come to fruition and Jake Paul pushes for a rule set where they're wearing heavier gloves and it's shorter rounds, then maybe he'll make it out of a round or two. But if he is to come forward and box in that way, that's going to be his undoing for me. But here's what I see as being the most likely scenario. Canelo Alvarez both walks and stalks Jake Paul down. He does so with a high, tight guard, and he does so with the intention to invite punches being thrown at him from Jake Paul. When those punches are thrown at him, Canelo Alvarez takes them on the guard, he soaks them up, and he replies, not with singles, with punches in bunches, with variation going to both head and body, and in doing so, he will be able to penetrate through the guard of Jake Paul and take Jake Paul out of there in, I would say, a maximum of 3 rounds. But let me tell you what, fair fucking play to Jake Paul if this fight does happen, man, because it will show that actually he's a man of his word. He's been saying for years that he would be willing to get in there with Saul Canelo Alvarez, and although I believe that it is an absolute disaster waiting to happen, you have to give him credit for backing up his words. A lot of people in the influencer scene have said stuff like this and have no desire to go through with it, and clearly there is some sort of desire from Jake Paul here, and he'll give both sides of the boxing community and the boxing fan base what they want to see. The Jake Paul fans will finally get their answer as to whether Jake Paul can compete at world level or not. And the fans that felt disgusted by what they saw in the Jake Paul against Mike Tyson exhibition fight will finally get their closure in being able to silence any doubters that were lingering about that Jake Paul is not anywhere near world level as a professional boxer. And that's no disrespect intended by that, by the way, because Jake Paul is an influencer boxer who has now become a professional boxer. I would say he is the best out of all of the influencer boxers, and he is definitely the one that has taken it the most seriously, committed his life to it, and really done a great job of learning while on the job. And I myself have so much to thank for the likes of Jake Paul and KSI and Logan Paul and whoever else started off this whole scene. I've benefited from it massively myself. I'll be forever grateful for what they have done. And as for Jake Paul, he can go back to fighting ex-MMA guys after this fight. He could fight a Tommy Fury maybe, possibly finally KSI, the fight that everyone actually wants to see. And in doing so, he can have made a quick 100 mil, maybe more than that, to fight a guy who he has no chance against, in my opinion. But here's what Jake needs to remember, and that is that you do not play boxing. World level fighters like Billy Joe Saunders, Sergey Kovalev, Danny Jacobs, so many more, that's just off the top of my head, have not been the same, in my opinion, since fighting Saul Canelo Alvarez. So for a guy with the lack of experience that Jake Paul has in comparison to Canelo, this is a huge risk, and a risk that could have severe consequences to the career and the general health of Jake Paul. And you know what? You could look at it from exactly the same angle and say that that is what Jake Paul did to Mike Tyson at the age he was at, and the inactivity and being decades and decades past his prime. And therefore, you could say, well, what goes around comes around. But for me, as much as it may sound negative, I don't want this to be a video of me bashing Jake Paul. I really honestly have a lot of respect for Jake Paul, and I respect Jake Paul if he is to take this fight against Saul Canelo Alvarez. Listen, I've said it before, I can't say too much, but I have heard this on the grapevine for a while now, and now we're hearing it probably months after I first heard it. I genuinely think that this is going to come to fruition. I genuinely do think that we'll see Saul Canelo Alvarez in there on Cinco de Mayo against Jake Paul. Maybe I'm wrong, but either way, if it happens, I will respect Jake Paul massively, because he will be trying to climb Everest, and I just honestly think it's impossible for him. But you lot let me know your thoughts in the comment section below. I know who you're going to be picking to win, but tell me, does Jake Paul have any chance? Does the size, the weight, the reach advantage go in his favour at all? And is it good or bad for boxing? Is this why we've had the announcement of Canelo Alvarez against Terence Crawford so far in advance to prep us so that we don't lose our shit when we get the announcement of Saul Canelo Alvarez against Jake Paul? And just for the record, if we're going this route and each men want to, you know, sort of warm himself up against an influencer, pay me $50 million, I'm very happy to get in there with Terence Crawford. We're not far off the same size, so just throwing my name in the hat there. Either way, people, let me know your thoughts in the comment section below, and I will see you all in the next one.